Guess where we're at? So we are at Bass Pro Shops, and we are going to film some kayak fishing seminar with Chris Ritchie and Ryan Walker. But we are at the granddaddy of all Bass Pro Shops in Springfield, Missouri, and we are going to walk in and we're going to shop a little bit, but most importantly we're going to watch a little bit of kayak fishing from Chris Ritchie and Ryan Walker. So hope you guys enjoy the video, but most importantly I hope you enjoy the content from the seminar. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Hey folks, thanks a bunch for coming out today. I know that we're following up a pretty hard act in Stacey King and Zona and all those guys, but we'll try to make it a little bit entertaining. My partner Chris and I are going to try to talk a little bit about a successful kayak fishing trip, what it takes to get the boat rigged, and some of the things that we do to make our day on the water better. A little bit about us, or me individually. My name is Ryan Walker. I'm the founder of the Ozark Smallmouth Alliance, along with Chris and a whole bunch of other guys that help. We started OSA about 2 years ago in an effort to promote and preserve the Ozark smallmouth bass. My history is a long history of guiding. I was 8 years full-time on trout waters and salmon waters, and spent a lot of time smallmouth guiding. Chris and I together own a guide service called Ozark Stream Guides that we started up last year, and if you want to know a little bit more information about that, we can tell you after the seminar. I am also on the Wilderness Systems National Fishing Team, and we're a member of a local kayak shop angling organization as well. And I'll let Chris give a little bio on himself, and then we'll start ahead.
I'm Chris Ritchie. I've been helping out with Ozark Smallmouth Alliance for about 2 years now, probably. 2 years. I've also been on the Jackson Kayak Pro staff for 3 years, as well as various other pro staffs. I've been kayak fishing for probably 5 or 6 years exclusively. Ryan, you've probably been doing it as long, right? Not that long? Okay.
I'm newer to it.
Okay, well, I actually kind of help run a pro staff also up here for a local kayak shop, and that's how I met Ryan. We added Ryan to the team, essentially because, well, he's much more aged and wise, you know, and I'm much better looking, and we needed to calm that down a little, and he's got
a better beard.
He's the yin to the yang, if that means anything to you guys. So. With that, we're going to start off with kayak safety, and I'm going to let Ryan touch a little bit on that. And we kind of do best tag teaming these things, and we'll bounce off each other through this, and feel free to ask questions as well.
Yeah, so just to set some expectations about this, the first thing we always talk about in any kayak seminar that we do is safety. I mean, this is just fishing, it's just kayaking, it's not worth losing your life over. So we touch on the must-haves for a kayak and the nice-to-haves, and then we'll walk into a little bit more. My specialty is fly fishing. Chris's specialty is more conventional fishing, so we'll kind of bounce off of each other as we go through this. And I just want to set the expectation that we're not going to get too deep off into the woods on technique. But that being said, any questions that you have, I mean, we're just trying to do this thing to help you guys. So if you've got questions, shout them out. We want this to be as interactive as we can. So we'll walk through some of the kayak safety must-haves here real quick. First and foremost, never go anywhere, doesn't matter if it's your backyard pond or what, without a PFD. Have a PFD with you and wear it. A good dry bag is essential to being safe on the river, especially in the cold weather months. And also a really good first aid kit. Those are 3 of the 4 things that you really should always have in your boat with you. Last and not least, a good rescue knife. I can think of at least 1 or 2 times where I was really happy that I had a knife to cut something, maybe not on me, but that had been attached to my boat that was now attached to what my boat was attached to, so that I could get my boat loose, so you can kind of extrapolate what happened there. And so those 4 things, Chris and I think both agree, are the 4 things that you need to always have in your kayak. Now, there's some really nice to haves that we think you should have as well. Dry clothes. What are you going to put in your dry bag? Dry clothes. Good dry pair of shoes, socks, pants. You can keep a solar blanket in there for when you're in the winter. Keep some high protein snacks somewhere, Cliff Bars, whatever you want like that.
But I would say also in the wintertime, a dry bag with a change of clothes and a towel and stuff to start a fire is not it's not a nice to have. It's a got to have. Because if you fall in the water and the water's 37 to if you're lucky 45 in the winter, if we got a mild winter, you don't have much time. And once you get out of the water, if you don't get warmed up quickly, you're gonna be in trouble. And I always say I hate getting wet. Period. I swim, but I don't like it. And so everyone says, well, you kayak fish, don't you like getting wet? Absolutely not. That is the #1 goal of mine, is to not end up in the water. And that's we'll get to more of that during the seminar, but it happens, and so you always plan for that, because it's better to plan for it and it not happen than for it to happen and you not to be ready.
So a little anecdotal information on that. Last year, almost a year ago, just a little over a year ago this time last year in 2017, Chris, myself, and about 5 other guys on our pro staff team, 4 or 5 other guys on our pro staff team, just did a little short float right here on the James from Shelvin Rock access down to Hootentown access, and about halfway in on really low water, like 80 CFS. This was dragging your kayak water. It came a toad strangler. It was for hours.
And it was 40 degrees.
And it was 40 degrees. And luckily, I forgot rain gear, which I usually always have in my boat, but I had dry clothes in my dry bag. So when the rain quit and we got back to the boat ramp, in between chills and shivering fits, we were able to get into dry clothes and make the rest of the day more comfortable. So it's going to happen. There's an old saying, if you spend enough time on the water, you're going to end up in it. And for when those times come, you really want to be prepared. So this little piece right here, 6 foot of 1 inch PVC. You're probably wondering, it's tubing, clear PVC tubing. So one of the things we always look out for on the river is the tree called the strainer. And that's the tree that's across the river in swift water, and invariably one of your crew is going to get in that, flip, and get caught. You got a life jacket on, the water's shallow, most of the time you're going to pop right up, come out the other side, then it's a matter of salvage, right, getting your gear. Happened to us on a guide trip last year, didn't it? Nobody got hurt. Think about that same scenario for somebody who's in really swift water that gets caught in that and turned over, and the boat turns over on top of them and they're pinned. That piece, that 6 foot 1 inch tube essentially turns into scuba gear, snorkeling gear. Feed the tube down to them, try to calm them down and get them breathing, and that may end up saving. That was one of the best ideas I've ever seen. That could absolutely save somebody's life. And one other thing that I think you should probably, if you're going to spend enough time on the water, get good at, is knowing how to use a throw rope, a rescue rope. So this is a 60-foot piece of, I think it's 4-gauge rope that comes in a canvas bag that you can throw across the river and catch somebody as they're coming down if they're in front of you or behind you. So that's just kind of the safety of it, and those are the things that we feel like you probably ought to get good at. Any questions? So I'm going to let Chris talk a little bit about kayak selection.
So who here actually already has a kayak? Wow, that's a lot. The most common thing that I hear whenever I talk to people about kayak fishing, it's either they love it or they absolutely hate it. And 99% of the time, the reason they absolutely hate it is because they got into a kayak that they should not have been in. And we help out, like I said, with a kayak shop that sponsors us and stuff like that. And every time we get a new salesman in, it's like they're just trying to make the sale. So I actually walked up on a conversation where they were talking to a guy about a kayak, and this guy was probably 300 pounds, and he was trying to sell him a 10-foot kayak. And I don't know what you guys know about that, but a 300-pound person on a 10-foot kayak never works. Unless it's a new canoe Frontier 10, that might be okay, but that's the only way that would ever work. And so that's why kayak selection is so important. We'll go into this a little deeper. Back to what I said, don't be the fat guy in a little boat. Generally, I have the rule of if you're 200 pounds or under, you're going to be okay in just about anything. If you're 200 pounds and above, you want something that's 12 foot long or longer. I generally use a big rig. I don't have to, but it's a gigantic kayak. It's a great kayak, but it's gigantic. But Ryan also used another boat called the Coos HD, and Ryan uses another brand, and they're very similar. But the thing is, Ryan, he's under 200 pounds. He could get by with a 10-foot kayak, yet he still chooses a bigger one, just due to the fact that a longer kayak tracks better. But size-wise and for the paddler, it's really not essential for someone 200 pounds, in my opinion, 200 pounds or below to have a bigger kayak. So if budget's an issue, you can get by getting a 10-foot kayak, and that's fine. I actually started out with a 10-foot kayak, an FS10 Ascend. I think a lot of people probably start out with the FS10 or the other Ascend kayaks. So we'll go on to the next one. All right. The next thing that you should really look into whenever you're picking a kayak is what you're going to be doing, the type of waters that you're going to be floating. A lot of people don't think about that. They don't realize that there's a difference in hull design, and there's a huge difference. Every design has got an intended use, and there are a few like the D12 here. It's a good kind of crossover between river and lake. What is your boat called? The Attack. The Attack is a pretty good crossover boat. Coos HD is a good crossover boat. Hey, can we take these off here real quick? I want to show you guys something. And this is like a general way of looking at these things, to where you can go into any kayak shop and you can say, this is definitely going to be good for the rivers, and the other one's definitely going to be good for the lakes. Hey Ryan, can you hold this for a sec? Alright. See if I can do this without knocking this in. When you look at the bottom of this kayak, it cuts in hard in the front and it cuts in hard in the back. You see the line down the middle? Generally that means that this kayak is going to track well. That means it's going to paddle in a straight line well. It's not going to be hard to handle. At the same time, it's not going to be super maneuverable on a river. It'll work, it'll do okay, but it's not its intended use. This is kind of more of a medium hull. This is going to be good, and it's going to be okay in both. It's not going to be super great for paddling a long distance on a lake, and it's also not going to be super great for these really tight and twisty rivers that we got sometimes around here. So on a kayak that you're going to want for a river, you're going to want a sharp cut in on the back. And on the front, it's going to be a lot smoother. It's almost going to be, there's not going to be any cut in at all. It's just going to be kind of smooth on the front. And it's a very gradual move from front to back. And then in the center, it's generally flat. So that's the easiest way to tell if you're looking at a kayak that's going to be okay for the river or the lake. We primarily do rivers. So we want kayaks that are going to handle well, maneuver well, that kind of thing. All right, so the next thing, whenever you're looking at a kayak, is you want to be realistic about what you're doing. Kayaks aren't just for floating anymore. They're not just for going out and having a good time and, you know, having a drink on the river or something. That's not, I mean, they use those for that, but that's not what primarily they're used for anymore. These kind of have become a utilitarian where people use them for a little bit of everything. I actually know the guy in this picture. He's got his own hunting show. He's also the founder of Orion Coolers, if you've ever heard of Orion Coolers. And he hunts all the time. I've seen him put a black bear on the front of his kayak and paddle it across the lake. So, I mean, black bears aren't huge, but of course it was shot. It was dead. Definitely not alive. But you want to be realistic about what your plans are. There are kayak manufacturers out there that make lay-down blinds for the kayaks, that make not lay-down blinds. I mean, they're like this tall, sitting up off the kayak for also for duck hunting, I believe. But that's the thing that you really need to look into. If you're looking at a kayak and you think, well, I could probably duck hunt out of this, but there's another one over here that you could duck hunt out of, and you can get a blind for it, you can get all the stuff you need for it, but it's a little more money. I would still, even if you got to wait a little longer to buy it, I would always wait, because what we run into a lot, what we see a lot, is somebody will buy a kayak and they get it because it was $200 cheaper, and then they always end up selling that kayak and going with the one they originally wanted. So one thing I will add to this kayak selection is to demo. All these things in mind, paddler size is probably the biggest thing. But even if you have two people the same size as me and another person, we're not going to like the same boat. 9 times out of 10, probably we're not going to like the same boat. And it's because, in all honesty, a lot of these boats are made the same, or maybe the same ideas in mind, but every person's different, and they might be sitting in a kayak that you just sat in. You said, that's the most stable feeling kayak I've ever been in my life. And they'll sit in it and they'll say, that thing is a piece of garbage. So every kayak feels different to every butt. Every person thinks of them differently. If you have a chance, if you've got a buddy that's got one or whatever, call around and find out if you can demo them before you buy it. Yeah.
All right, who fly fishes? Oh, you guys? How many of you have actually fly fished out of a kayak? Yeah, I think I've seen you before. So, fly rods are how I came into all of this. I've actually only been on a kayak team and fishing out of a kayak for about 3 years. But one of the reasons that I really wanted to get involved in it is to reach water that I could not reach, either wading or I couldn't get a big boat to. Kayak fishing has absolutely opened my world up to the places that I could fish and the things that I could do out of that kayak. And to Chris's point on kayak selection for fly fishermen is probably one of the most crucial things that you can do. I don't mind casting sitting down. I'd much rather cast standing up from a stable platform. So if you know that your main purpose for buying that kayak is to fly fish out of it, find a boat you can stand up in. Find a boat that's got good open deck space. Because any of you that have ever pulled fly line off a fly reel know that if it hits the ground and it's near your feet or it's near something else, it's going to tangle up in it. It's just going to happen. So find a boat that has a good open bow, has a good unencumbered workspace is what I call it. Somewhere that's got it kind of smooth, not a lot of stuff sticking up. And it's one of the most amazing things in the world to be able to get somewhere that somebody couldn't get by waiting and knowing that you're maybe catching fish that haven't been caught in a while. So it can be done. So some of the things that I always talk about, and these are angling 101 things. Know your water. If you don't know your water, learn your water. So if you're going somewhere new, we have this thing called the interwebs now. I didn't know what it is. The interweb, internet.
It's the internet for the young people.
Yeah, it's the internet for the young people. So we growing up as a kid in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, into the early 90s, I had maps. I had the Missouri Gazetteer. I had an atlas. I had something I actually had to find the blue line on and study. Then I also had to pick up the phone and call a tackle shop and say, hey, I'm coming up there in a couple of weeks. I've never fished your water before. What can you tell me? And then you had to be suspect of that advice because you're from somewhere else. Now, the internet, there is absolutely no reason that you cannot know the water that you're going to fish, probably down to what the fish were taking the day before. Because just about every body of water has some sort of a report that's moderately current on it. So know your water, learn your water. That's part of the scouting process, even if you haven't been onto it. Just like I talked about, keep your work area clean, and fly fishing especially. One of the worst things, the worst feeling in the world, check out a big popper, you have a big old bucket mouth come up, pull that thing down, and you set the hook, the fish takes off running, and doink, because your fly line was stuck on your foot peg, and that fish took off at 100 miles an hour, and he got about 3 feet, and boom, he pops off. So keep mind of where your fly line is at all times. Have all your tools at the ready. So when I'm on the water, I keep a lanyard on, and on that lanyard, if I'm trout fishing, I've got a pair of forceps on it. If I'm smallmouth fishing, I've got a pair of needle nose somewhere close in the deck or on my lanyard to where I can get to it, along with my old age glasses. So just keep your tools handy, keep all that stuff handy. The other really, and this took me a long time to figure out, if you're fly fishing moving water from a kayak, keep your line out of the boat if at all possible. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. Wet fly line does not tangle up. I mean, it can if it gets cold, but most of the time if it's wet, it is not going to tangle up. If it's out of the boat behind you or trailing, it's going to stay in a fairly organized chaos mess, if you will. It's not going to get shot through the guides in a knot. And so the other thing is because when you're casting sitting down out of a kayak, loading a fly rod is not casting an 1/8 ounce spinnerbait or an 1/8 ounce jig or a 1/4 ounce jig across the lake. It's actually loading a fly line. When that line is in the water next to you, you're creating friction. And you're basically helping load the line as it goes behind you. So that's another good reason to keep it out of the boat. Where'd my picture go, Chris? Oh, all right. So we'll talk a little bit about each one of these. Study the terrain, isolate key spots. If you've never been to that water before, and and again, I'm talking about rivers, but the same thing translates into lake. Look for high percentage areas, target-rich environments, if you will. So if it's a river, look for riffles with big pools below them. Oxygen, food, cover. That's what those fish need, right? Same way in a lake. If you're a smallmouth fisherman, you're looking for boulders, gravel, chunk rock on drop-offs. If you're on a river, you're looking for boulders, gravel, drop-offs. Somewhere where they can eat, evade, and feel safe. So study the terrain, isolate the key spots. The other thing to do, and in Missouri we're pretty lucky, we've got this site called Paddler's Guide to the Ozarks, and it generally stays fairly updated, and you can go in there and read mile by mile. Hey, there's a strainer on the right here at mile 38 on the James River. There is a, stay left on this shoal on the Finley at mile 16. So those kind of things are no trouble spots. Find out where you can get in trouble on the water. And these are just general rules to all kinds of fishing. And the last safety thing, always tell somebody where you're going. If you're going by yourself, let somebody know, hey, I'm putting in at 7 o'clock at the confluence of the Finley and the James, and I'm going to float to Hootentown, or I'm putting in at Marble Grounds, and I'm going to take out at Kerr, or I'm going up to Dry Knob, and I'm going to float down to Davis Ford, or wherever you're going to be, whatever water you're going to be on. Tell somebody where you're going and when you expect to be back. Most of the time, you have cell service where you are. There's still plenty of times that you don't. So if you get into trouble and you get past that, that threshold of where you should have been home, somebody at least has a general idea of where you're going to be. So that's always a good thing to do. So keep your work area clean and clear. This is one of the best ideas I've ever seen. This is a milk crate, and what this guy has done is he's taken long zip ties and he zip tied them to the bottom of the milk crate, sticking up to where they're like fingers like this. And he's just using that as a big stripping basket in the bottom of his kayak. And basically what happens is a line falls in there, and it doesn't go in really any order, but it hits those zip ties and bounces off and stays untangled. That's an incredible, if you're a fly fisherman in a kayak, you need to do that. It doesn't take up much space. You can put it in the hatch behind you, and then when you're ready to fish, throw it up front and just drop your fly line straight into it. It's a really, really good idea. Plan your exit and entry. Plan your entry and exit. So this is where the rubber meets the road, right? When I'm fly fishing, I'm generally throwing bigger flies that have action, or I'm throwing topwater, or I'm throwing, crawfish patterns. Know where your prey species live. So basically what I found here was a diagram of almost every water type on a river, could be anywhere in the United States. You've got a riffle, you've got an eddy pool in the middle, you've got the trough out pool on the elbow bend, and maps like this can really help you figure out your key spots. So I'm going to come up to a place like this, and if it's the start of the day, I'm going to start out throwing topwater in the eddy points, here and here, in the slow water, or finding slow water behind boulders and throwing topwater in there, a frog, or a pencil popper, or something like this. Something, everybody knows that topwater bite is the best way to go, right? It's a ton of fun. If I don't have any luck there, I've got every type of water I need to fish every type of presentation I want to. I'll switch to a big streamer, bait fish pattern, and rip it through the riffle. So just break your water down into its independent types and fish each type independently. Your first pattern doesn't start producing right, switch, and just keep switching. We get kind of lackadaisical when we're out fishing. We go, I know this works and it'll work down here. I have to stop myself and go, okay, I'm actually going to fish this water. I'm actually going to learn what is going on in this water right now. So it's not uncommon for me to do 8 or 10 fly changes in a 100-yard stretch of water. Same way, it should be the same way with, if you're trying to figure out what they're doing on conventional gear. So, and so plan your entry and exit to this would be, where am I going to come in and where am I going to fish first? How am I going to approach that water? Can I fish it pointing downstream? Do I need to get in the seam and turn the boat around so that I can throw my, my presentation back upstream and drift with it? So just plan, because once you're in there, you only got one chance, unless you're going to get out and wait and come back up. If you get in there and you've got to turn everything around, you're going to spook fish. It's just going to happen, especially on our little Ozarks creeks. So get in there, know which way you're going to come, study it from above and say, okay, well, I can get to that riffle by going on this seam on the right. You'll start understanding how the water's going to react to your boat. If it's going to pull you over, you got to go farther right. So plan your entries and exits for every single piece of water that you're going to fish. So here's a few tips and tricks on gear, talking on gear. So I smallmouth fish more than I do everything. I was a trout guide for 8 or 10 years, and I kept smallmouth in my back pocket because they were my fish. I didn't want to share them with anybody. So now with Ozark Smallmouth Alliance, it's a little bit different. They've caught on. Now we're just trying to educate people on how special those fish really are. But my weapon of choice and the rod that I've got on the water with me every time I'm out is an 8-foot 8-weight. And I carry 3 different line types with me for one reel. I have two spare spools for that reel there. I carry 3 different line types. The reason the 8-foot 8-weight is length, right? So we fish small creeks, we fish little rivers, and they generally have lots of overhang. So a shorter rod like this, I can load it quicker. My roll cast does not have to be as high. I've lost basically a foot of rod, so I've got that extra clearance to make a little bit better presentation under canopy. The lines that I always have with me, so like I said, I've got a main spool and 2 spares. So I carry a wake forward floating for general presentation purposes. I carry a sink tip, usually in type 6, and then lengths of that same in a separate bag just for different depths. And then I carry a big bass bug taper, something that'll turn over big. You look at this frog, really sort of a sail, isn't it? And the big bass bug taper lines are weighted much heavier at the front, and they will help turn that big fly over at the end of the cast. So I'll carry those 3 lines on spare spools, and I usually just have them in a bag behind me. Don't get overly technical. I can go geek all day up here, but this is kayak fishing. Have fun. Learn the water. If you love to fly fish, or if you've never fly fished out of a kayak, go with someone who's done it before, and just study what they do, or don't. One other thing that is pretty important, when you're sitting in a kayak, open your cast up. 4-inch loops out to 40 feet aren't important when you're casting a gigantic streamer. The other thing that causes is what we'll call the bonehead effect. And he's laughing as he knows what it is. You put that thing forward, boom, hits you right in the back of the head. Open your cast up. It really does not matter. I mean, a cast is like a landing with a plane. As long as you can walk away from it, you're all right. As long as that fly hits the water in front of you, it really doesn't matter what your cast looks like. So open your cast up a little bit, open the loop up a little bit. You'll avoid tangles, you'll avoid hitting yourself in the back of the head. And the other thing that's really important, especially for you river rats like us, keep the rod parallel to the boat if you can while you're going down the river. Don't have it sticking up like this. This is a $600 fly rod. It's going to be, by the time you're on the water and you have it in a rod holder, it's going to be a foot off the boat and then 8 feet up in the air. You're going to hit something, period. That's just the way it doesn't matter where you are. I always try to keep the rod, so this boat has a kind of an integrated well to keep it out in front of you. For me, that's still not good enough, because anybody been on the Finley below, like the railroad bridge, not the railroad bridge, but the old walk bridge between there and the river run, or Two Rivers Bike Park? There's a couple of tight turns in there, right? What's going to happen to that rod tip when you hit the bank? Snap. Bam. So I'll end up putting it back like this, and then just that way I don't have to move it very far when I'm going down the river. I've built myself an integrated rod stager on the side of my kayak, and anybody wants to see it, I'll show you a picture of it. But it keeps the rods flat against my boat, and I haven't broken any tips yet. So not on the fly rod. I've broken lost plenty of other tips, haven't I? We won't talk about that. Any questions? Anything anybody wants to know about this? I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Thank you.
Just your experience, you know 3/4 of the time what you're going to be fishing with. So you don't need a giant tackle box. I've limited myself the past 2 seasons to 4 of these, and that's it. That's all I have. I have 4 of these, and I have a bait caster and a spin cast. Sometimes I'll have 2 spin casts and a bait caster, but I've never, ever in my life, carried more than 3 rods. It gets too cumbersome. There's too much stuff to trip on or to lose. And you know, some of these rods are $200, and you get a $200 reel on it. You lose it in the river, that's $400. I mean, my wife, for instance, in the back here, there's a picture of her with this smallie, really nice, almost 20-inch smallie that she caught on the river. And then, I don't know, probably 10 minutes after that, she reached out to grab our dog that was drowning in the river and tipped the kayak over and lost a $150 rod and a $100 reel. You know, it's really easy to do when you have more things on your kayak than what you should have. And when you think you need 4 or 5 rods or whatever it is, it's super easy to break a rod tip or to lose one. Rod land. So I don't use it a lot because, like I said, I carry 4 Plano boxes. Generally, I'll have 1 on the side, and 2 under my seat. The 2 under my seat are generally things that I don't use a lot of. The 2 on the sides is usually jig heads or crankbaits, because I use a lot of those. But the tank well, this is the tank well. The tank well, they make tackle storage devices. Probably the most prominent one is the Black Pack by Yak Attack. It's essentially just something to cram all your tackle boxes into. I don't like them for the fact that I have to turn around, or you know, if I'm in fast-moving water or whatever, I'm going to have to pull over to the side of the bank to reach around and get it. Like I said, I like the minimalistic type of thing where I can just reach under my seat and grab it. But if you have a lot, if you want to carry more than 3 or 4 boxes, I would advise to getting a milk crate. That's generally how everybody starts, and then they graduate to the Black Pack or something like it. Now Wildy makes their own crate, which is it's pretty slick. I'm thinking about getting one carbon and limb off of it or something, but it's pretty nice. That's kind of the same thing I just talked about. Keep the deck clean. That was another thing that he talked on. So to that point of keeping the deck clean, most of these kayaks anymore are designed to stand on while you're fishing, and I have a really bad habit of leaving crankbaits on the deck or other treble hooked items, and sometimes I've ended up almost treble hooked myself. He has ended up treble hooked himself. So it's not a fun thing to have to yank a treble hook out of your arm or your foot or something like that, or your shoe even, because it's in your shoe, it's not coming out. You're cutting the hook, guaranteed you're cutting the hook. So keep your deck clean. It's going to save you money in the long run, either in hooks, but also the scupper holes will rob you of tackle pretty frequently. They'll fall down in there.
That's a bad feeling when it's your last 1/8 ounce or 16,000 head and you're in a tournament. You're like, man, they've just been hitting that really slow, and then you go, where is it? And it goes down the scupper hole in about 8 feet of water. And you're like, okay.
Then you borrow them from your buddy.
Yeah, then you borrow them from your
and
buddy.
hope he didn't do the same thing.
Yeah. A good buddy will give you his next to last. A real good buddy won't.
So back to what I was saying earlier, a kayak's not a bass boat. Don't treat it like one. Don't get a bunch of stuff piled on it. Get yourself over your weight capacity of a kayak, and then also get to a point where you're going to be putting yourself in a bad situation with your kayak being over capacity or something like that. And the last thing I want to hit on is kayak fishing tournaments. Most people don't even realize that these exist. And actually there's 2 pretty good ones in this area. There's a river series and there's also a lake series. The river series is called ORAT, or Ozarks River Anglers Tournament Trail, and the lake series is called MOYAT. They're both good series. They're both ran really well. This sport's kind of in its infancy, so you usually got to lend it to some leeway. But actually, there's one in Waynesville this year in northern Missouri, and I think they have $100,000 in cash and prizes being paid out at that one. And I mean, that's kind of crazy. Do you have a hog trowel? No. So everything is done by hog trowel and pictures. So a hog trowel is essentially an approved device that you measure your fish on. They give you an identifier, and the identifier is in the picture with it. So you take a picture, you have the identifier that they gave you at the beginning of the tournament, and then at the end of it, it's either best 3 or best 5 fish depending on the tournament. And they judge it by inches. So it's not like a traditional tournament that goes off of weight. It's all judged by inches. And like I said, this is something that's growing. It's been pretty great. I mean, even in our local tournaments, first place will win $250, $500. We've seen local tournaments as high as $1,000, $1,500 for top payout. And usually they pay out, depending on the attendance, between 5 and 10 spots. So I mean, that's pretty good. And it's a lot more fun. It's not like the bass boat tournament circuit where everybody's kind of jerks. I mean, Mike Kiefer, I fished a tournament. I wasn't actually fishing with him, but we put it in the same spot. It was pretty great. I mean, it's kind of neat to be able to be in a tournament and know that if I needed something, I go, hey, can I borrow that? And it's not that big of a deal. It's competitive, but it's still a lot of fun. So know that kayak fishing tournaments are out there. Look them up. If you guys have any questions, you're welcome to look us up on Facebook, Ozarks Smallmouth Alliance, or Ozark Stream Guides. And then we've got a website as well. However, it's down. It should be up in a couple weeks, but Feel free to message us with any questions. But does anybody have any questions right now?